Hey, Jimmy, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Nathan Kumagai. I work for Dave Marr, who won't be here today, but I'm sitting in for him, and I'll probably join this group on a regular basis as well.
We are super happy to have you, Nathan. I think that's great. It's great to have both you and Qualcomm participate in this group.
Yeah.
I think so with that, we have soon covered the entire supply chain in the telco ecosystem, from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yep, I think that's the idea. So that's good. Yeah. Otherwise, I've been involved with OpenChain for a good deal of time. I helped start early on the onboarding, this kind of team, and it's mostly just behind the scenes kind of thoughts about marketing and what to do. I'm helping with right now I'm helping update the website. It's a lot has evolved in the last few years. So, I want to pull some of the communities like this more forward. So it turns out there's a lot of people who are conforming to OpenChain, but I think there's a step where we need to start getting them pulled in and involved in groups like this. And so we're trying to make those connections.
Sounds good. And that's actually the perfect lead in to my first agenda point, or rather the first agenda point is, let me display the slides here. And if someone needs attention, shout or scream so that I hear it, because I'm only on the one screen now. So if I'm going to share my screen, I will not see what anyone else says. But I promised Chain this morning that I would display the antitrust reminder that we operate under the Linux Foundation's antitrust rules, and all the meetings are open. The meetings are recorded, and unless someone disagrees during this meeting, they will also be published in the normal channels. So with that out of the way, welcome to the Telco group meeting. The first point on the agenda I had was really a welcome and round the table. Nathan has admirably already taken the initiative and covered that for himself. But for the rest of those on the call, anyone want to start?
Yes, hi, this is Marcel. I'm director at PwC in Germany, and I'm head of our open source software services that we provide to our clients. And I've been involved in OpenChain for quite some years already. And yeah, as I say, we do all kinds of services from consulting and implementation work around open source software compliance and security, to open source software managed services, compliance managed services, and also auditing and certification. And that's where the part of OpenChain comes in. So we also do certify companies towards the ISO 5230 standard.
Thank you. I think we also have my colleague Håkan on the call.
Yes, right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Håkan Ausberg. I am, as Steven said, a colleague of him representing Ericsson, the open source program office. And since this was fairly recently started within Ericsson, my background initially was as a developer, but I have for the last 15 years or something been responsible for the intake of open source components within Ericsson. So that is compliance is my area. Thank you.
So that means that when Håkan speaks, he actually knows what he's talking about, which distinguishes him from me, who speaks a lot but don't know what I'm talking about at all.
Not true, but anyway.
So is there anyone else on the call? As said, when I display the agenda, I can't see the slides or see the participants.
I think we're covered.
We're covered. Good.
4 of us.
So that took care of the first agenda point, quick and easy. That's good.
Good to meet you all. Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent, and great to be working with you all, both Nathan and Marcel. Hopefully in the future there will be more of us. We will have time to do some more marketing, if you will, before the next Cadence call, I hope, and we'll get more people on board as we gain momentum, no doubt. Anyhow, that's the other point. Going forward, discussing with Shane and other board members, we decided that we would try to run these meetings once a month, the first Thursday of every month. And to cater for as broad set of participants as possible, we decided that we'll do 2 meetings a day. I think that's been done by a few other of the OpenChain work groups that has a diverse set of participants. So most of those meetings will be sort of a rinse and repeat. As I told Marcel in the beginning of the meeting, that means I get to run twice as many meetings. I get twice the fun. Of course, if you don't want to, you don't have to participate in both calls, especially if it's an inconvenient time. So we're only really expecting people to take part in one. And there will be a large part of repetition between the meetings. And I'll try to act as sort of the facilitator between the various groups. But if we need to, we can always call for an ad hoc meeting or try to resolve if we have differences between the various groups over email. The email list has the benefit of always being open for participation. So with this group, what we have done in the past is exchange experiences, wisdom, knowledge, and sort of what's current issues in the telco industry. But what we also discussed, since it's sort of in our DNA to standardize things in the telco industry and harmonize and work for interoperability, we were looking at sort of what's a space where we realistically could make an impact. Are there any low-hanging fruits? And in the workshops we had last year, it's sort of identified that we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to software bill of material, but there are certain things we can do around software bill of material management, if you will, and sort of standardize best practice around that we believe would be beneficial for the telco industry. And of course, it's not telco industry specific. If someone else has the same problem and want to pick that up, they're more than welcome. But I think that the telco industry for us, it's a good place to start. We do have some, I believe, peculiarities in the industry, and we have some requirements perhaps in the industry that sort of just the way it's structured with and how the supply chain differs from, for example, the automotive industry. So in that sense, I think we are well served by having this group and starting to look at it. So what we have discussed in the past is to set up sort of a management standard for software bill of materials, standardizing things such as which data format should we use, which file format should that data be in, timing, when should the SBOM be delivered, perhaps even standardizing contract clauses or template contract clauses that could potentially be used by companies just to standardize. These are the terms we expect to get an SBOM on in our industry, and hopefully that could then lead to that we reach sort of a plug and play environment for SBOMs, where I can take the SBOM I receive from my supplier, I can plug it into my product and ship that downstream. Sort of as long as I trust the supplier, I can trust that I can just plug and play that and it will work with sort of minimal manual handling. And I'll actually drop out of the screen share now. And sort of if anyone wants to chime in, otherwise I will probably just run over everyone by monologuing.
And hey, Jimmy, just because I'm new, could you just remind me, is there an easy place to find the slides you're sharing? I would love some of this content for the website update. So
absolutely. No, there's no easy way to find that right now. It's on my hard drive, but I will certainly share that in the minutes of meeting after.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, this is it. Thank you. And this is a really nice intro for me. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more here.
Great. No, it's nice to be able to recap this as well, since we didn't really get fully started last year. We just took the initiative last year, so there still remains a lot of work to be done. But I were hoping that we could discuss sort of some fundamenta of this group. We did the same thing this morning, where we have some things I hope we can agree on before sort of all the work is started, and feel free to add to it or comment on it. But first of all, our goal here is not to change or fork the OpenChain specification. That's not what we're doing. We're sort of building an add-on on top of it instead. That's our first cornerstone of the work here. The second one is that whatever the output of this, whatever best practice standard we come up with, you shouldn't need to be OpenChain conformant to implement that. So the two should be independent from each other. It's of course very good and useful if you are OpenChain conformant for other reasons. But if we really want to get a spread of this, I think it's better if we make them independent. And this, whatever we come up with here, needs to adhere to the relevant international regulatory requirements. The ones I'm primarily thinking of is the US executive order, so that we shouldn't go contrary to that, because that would be counterproductive. But it was pointed out this morning that there might exist other international regulatory requirements we need to take into account. Does that sound like a good foundation for our work here?
Yeah, from my point, I guess basically this of course makes sense. Let me ask one other question which just came up in my mind. I mean, in OpenChain there are other groups, like I think there's an automotive group and so on. I don't know if they currently meet very regularly. Do you know about that? I mean, probably Chain would be the best to ask, right?
Yes, we had during our first meeting of this group, we actually had Helio from BMW, who's been instrumental.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So yes, I don't know their meeting cadence. I think it's perhaps once a month, or if it's less than that. And then there are, of course, the Japan work group.
Exactly.
Well.
I was just wondering in terms of the focus and the goal of this working group here, and the agenda or the vision you're currently setting, if this would make sense to compare, for example, to the automotive working group. What is their goal of their group, and what kind of standard agenda do they have, and how have they set up the group? It was just a thought if it makes sense to reconvene and think if how they manage this.
I think that makes a great deal of sense, and especially looking at the output from the automotive group. That was brought up in the discussion this morning as well, that the automotive group came up with one of the modules, if you will, to SPDX, SPDX Lite. And the discussion was, is that something we can reuse, or is that not granular enough for a telco environment? One of the reasons why we figured it made sense with a telco group is that sort of the telco value chain sort of convalescence in sort of on the vendor plane almost, where you will have a few large radio access network vendors such as ourselves and Nokia, who participated this morning, and Huawei and ZTE, who had participated in this group last year, and I think will participate going forward as well. So it sort of makes sense if OpenChain and if the OpenChain Telco group is a place where we can meet and discuss sort of how can we as sort of large market actors formalize something that's good for our suppliers, that's good for our customers, and ultimately good for us as well, on things that are sort of, you know, of not of any differentiating value, if you will. I mean, if you have a way of doing SBOMs, that's great, but probably our way of doing them, it's not a advantage compared to Nokia's. The important thing is that you have one, but but as we've seen, is that probably from our customers, we'll start getting a lot of different requirements on how do we deliver SBOMs to them. And no doubt Nokia, Qualcomm, everyone else will start seeing the same from their customers, that there's going to be a divergence on how do we deliver SBOMs and what's the requirements of each individual company. And probably as you're part of the value chain, it will mean that you have your requirements, but then your customers will put other requirements on you. So it will be a lot of unnecessary conversion and manual labor just to sort of coalesce on an SBOM, where it would be much easier for everyone involved to adhere sort of to the same standard of this is how we do it. It would also make sort of SBOMs more easily comparable between companies, which ultimately I believe is a good thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. The only other thing I wanted to mention, earlier you said you don't want to put any changes or make any changes to the ISO standards, the OpenChain standard. Again, I think this is, this makes completely sense. There can be additional requirements or additional documents around the OpenChain standard. But also, I mean, if we come across topics or points which should be changed in the OpenChain standard at some point in time, I think we should not be reluctant to flag them and record them, because if in a few years or in some years a new version of the OpenChain, an updated version comes out, I think it makes sense to already record everything that comes up. So this can then be incorporated at some point in time.
I think that's an excellent point, Marcel. That's an excellent point. No, we shouldn't rule that out. But at the same time, I don't want us to sort of have as the goal that we should impose what we come up with that makes sense in the telco sector on all other users of OpenChain. If something we come up with is useful, I think we'll get sort of a market adoption for that where it makes sense. Other sectors where it doesn't make sense don't need to adopt it. But if we find things that are sort of a general nature in OpenChain, of course, we should feed that back in. That's a very good point. Let's see, I'm still sharing my screen, right? Just to make sure.
Yes, you do.
Great. So I asked this of the group, and without prejudice to what we discussed this morning, I'll ask the same of you guys. Do you guys see a need for a formal terms of reference style document where we document sort of what are the sort of meeting cadence, what are the rules, what are our goals with this group, or are we fine, at least for now, to proceed in this ad hoc manner, if you will?
Just my side, I think it would help to have like some definition around this, like describing these goals, letting people know where we're trying to get to. It would be nice if they could go in and look and see maybe the progress we've gotten to. I think that would help with engagement. If we want to, bring more people into the process. Usually, I think people generally want to be more educated before they just jump on a call. Or before they're willing to. So I think it would help to have something, and I don't know how formal it has to be, but some information about what we're trying to do, where we're at, would help.
Yeah, I think the same. Just to have like 2 or 3 guiding principles. What we want to achieve, a goal is that we want to come up with a document regarding special requirements for SPDX by whatever, mid of 2022 or so, and that we work against some common goal or so. Just as an example, I mean, whatever the goals are.
Yep, I'm not opposed to that. I think that's probably a good idea to structure things that way. I think the benefit of not having sort of formal requirements or formal documentation of what we do is, of course, that we can be very flexible in what we do. The other is, as you say, it helps with onboarding, and as we intend to grow this activity, especially we're seeing sort of good engagement on the vendor side, and perhaps not so much on sort of what's upstream from the telco vendors yet. Neither do we see the engagement from the service providers yet. So I think in creating that onboarding, it probably helps having that material. So what I will do is that I'll make a rough draft of that. I think we have access to the OpenChain GitHub or some subpage of that where we could store information. I think Shane mentioned that in one of our calls. I'll figure out where we should store it anyhow, and I'll upload it there, notify the email list, and anyone is of course free to contribute and comment on that, and we can hopefully sort of edit that offline. Does that sound like an agreeable path forward?
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. And to some extent, I think mostly it's just it's sort of just an extended minutes of meeting of the 2 meetings we had today and the brainstorming sessions we had last year. So I don't think that's a huge effort required. It doesn't have to be super formal in that sense, as I think Nathan pointed out. So good, that covers item 3. And that goes, now we move into perhaps more of the concrete work. And based on the workshops we hosted last year, a number of key issues or key things crystallized. This is just sort of an excerpt of that, and I don't think we'll even have time to talk about all of it in this meeting. We certainly didn't this morning, but those are some key things that perhaps we could discuss now. Some of them probably require further thinking, and others we need to sort of get back to, and perhaps some we can even decide if we have a consensus in the group today. So the first topic for discussion is really, do we see a need, do we want to standardize in that sense what SBOM data format should be used? And by that I mean, should we mandate that it's SPDX in, for example, its ISO format version, or should we mandate Cyclone DX, or should whatever we come up with here remain agnostic to that? Remaining agnostic, of course, means a number of other things, but what's the sense for you, Marcel, and for you, Nathan?
I mean, what is the downside of the SPDX in the ISO format from your perspective? Does it put a special burden to your processes and to your data conversion, or is this a doable format? Has this been analyzed?
I think that for our end, and Håkan may be able to expand a bit on this, I think we are positive to SPDX in its ISO formats for mainly for one reason, actually, and it's the fact that it's an ISO standard. So it's nice for us to be able to refer to that. We don't really see any downsides to it, in the same way as we don't really see any benefit to Cyclone DX compared to that. So that's where we are. We are sort of leaning towards the SPDX ISO format, but it's of course good for us to have alignment on that.
Yeah, and if I should expand slightly on that, I mean, it's partly, I mean, Ericsson is a big company, and there are, it's kind of the same argument, getting, well, making a selection, what should we support? And one heavy argument for that internally is, of course, that SPDX is the ISO standard. So that's how to put it. We think maybe that any could be good enough, but going with something being ISO, being the ISO standard, is a good driver for internal implementation. It's also a good driver for pushing our suppliers, pushing our customers and such to join up on. I don't know if that is if it makes sense, but it tends to be easier to get everyone involved unless you have strong arguments against something, if it's a standard.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of an ISO standard, right? And particularly, we are now talking about, I mean, first of all, I think it would be interesting to have this conversation and with pros and cons and so on the different formats and standards within the larger group. I don't know what this morning came out, or I don't know if it makes sense to put it into a spreadsheet and come up with pros and cons, and how close are different telco companies already to this standard in terms of their internal data format and so on, and is this achievable or is it a big burden? I mean that's a question that need to be answered. But again, even so, if this group here or the telco industry would now go for one particular standard, which is not the ISO, there might be difficulties with suppliers who actually have their customers in the telco industry and automotive and other industries, and then again they need to adhere to different standards. I mean, therefore, the ISO, which hopefully would be and will be adapted by all kinds of industries and all kinds of companies, would probably be or will hopefully become the standard.
Yeah, I agree to that. And one upside of going with ISO standard is, of course, that if many, I mean, even if there are weaknesses, if many joins it and starts to support it, then it's also where efforts will be put to improve it. So any weaknesses will be taken care of, and all investments that you do as a company will be focused, and any tools you're using will most likely support it. So there are a lot of benefits for going for the ISO standard.
From my side, I think what gets hard is if you have to do one for one customer and another one for someone else. You know, more than any pro or con over or one or the other, you know, that's more of operationally what, you know, we want to avoid having to do. I think SPDX is supported for a long time, and I think it's got a lot of broad support, you know, across many industries. And being an ISO standard, I think that's probably what we, you know, prefer to see. But you know, I don't know. I guess I want to talk to some of my implementation team and see what, if we have the base data for one or the other. I'm not sure if it's just kind of easy to create the output in one format or the other, but you know, so maybe I can ask my team about that. It might be that we don't really need to decide this if it's fairly easy to create the, you know, the file in one or the other if you have the base data. So
yeah, I think to share sort of a bit was what mentioned this morning. I think there was consensus and been consensus in the brainstorming sessions also that most people tend to lean towards SPDX as being the sort of what has the most market traction, and also the benefit of the ISO standardization. So it seems to be a momentum around that. I really haven't heard any sort of strong arguments against it, apart from one company in the health, primarily active in the healthcare sector, that would have preferred Cyclone DX because that's sort of what works best in their industry. But that's also why I think it's sort of beneficial to do this in sort of the contained setting of the telco industry. That then you know, if anyone else sees a benefit in it, they can either pick it up or they can pick up parts of what we do here. So I think it sounds like no one is really, at this stage at least, against SPDX in its ISO format. There are certain benefits to it. Of course, SPDX, as was pointed out this morning, comes in sort of modules. So what we agreed this morning was also to look at which of the modules would we need to pick up. Could we pick up just the sort of bare minimum, which is SPDX Lite that was developed by the automotive work group, or do we need more granularity than that? So that was an action item from this morning that some people took to look into. What do we think we need from SPDX? Which modules should we say needs to be enabled? Perhaps not all of them needs to be enabled. Perhaps we want all of them to be enabled if that's what enables us to a company to switch between SPDX and Cyclone DX if that becomes a requirement for some companies. Or perhaps the requirement is that we need just as much data so we're able to do that conversion. Perhaps that's the requirement. But I think it's something we need to come back to, but it's good in already this stage, I think, so to gauge the groups on what's their feeling on SPDX. Is there any sort of obvious flaws with SPDX that means we can't use it in the telco industry and for this use case? And to me, it doesn't sound that anyone has brought that up. At least there might still be, but at least I haven't really heard that. Anyone else has any thoughts on the matter?
Jimmy, I think I agree that I don't think there's any flaws in it. SPDX has been around a long time. But I think the real question for maybe this group is like, do we specify one format, or do we, as you were saying, like specify the information we need so that we can, produce in whatever targeted formats are available, right? I think if we specify one format, there's a possibility of losing some of the community, but I don't know. To me, SPDX is so widely known. It doesn't seem like a really controversial decision, but
I guess it's a point we need to reconfirm, right? Once we grow this community and get traction on this work, it's probably something we would need to sort of reaffirm. But the good thing about being in early is you can make your voice heard easier now if you're of a dissenting opinion as to the use of SPDX.
Yeah, so no dissenting opinion here. I mean, we like SPDX, so that's.
Yeah, but I fully understand that we're not making a firm commitment. No one is saying that we'll only do SPDX. We can't change this later. I fully understand that people sort of might want to have a look at that and understand what their internal requirements are and so forth. But it's good to start that process at least with the question. So with that, we also discussed on file format, and what turned out in that discussion is one of the key questions was, do we only require a machine readable version, or do we require a machine readable and a human readable version of the SBOM? Or do we only require a human readable version? I don't think anyone supported that, but it's a theoretical option.
I mean, in the end, it comes down to who provides what, and do you convert it yourself to a human readable version, or do you need internally a human readable version or not? So what I see from OSPOS, and when it comes to different stakeholders within the compliance processes, that sometimes or quite often human readable versions are beneficial for some stakeholders and are required by some stakeholders. So that's just what I've been seeing on the market. So I guess machine readable and human readable does bring some benefits to cover all the desires from different stakeholders within the processes.
Gotcha. Nathan, do you have sort of any immediate reaction on the topic?
I think it's a good question. I hadn't really thought of this one for my team. I'll give it some thought. I think one nice thing though would be is if our group obviously can help reduce some of the the various options that we have to support, right? But yeah, I honestly, I don't know a lot about how much work it is to translate the machine readable version into the human version. To me, it sounds like something, if we had some decent tooling for, that's the best way to handle it. But
I would agree with that. And just to throw in my own thinking here is that I don't think there's, as I see it, no real downside to include a human readable version alongside the machine readable version. That sort of caters to probably to a lot of use cases. Unless we want to sort of put into whatever specification we come up with here, how you translate between the versions, or what tools and what versions of the tool you should be using to sort of ensure that you get the same results each and every time, then I think the cost of including that from the beginning is probably rather low compared to that, the potential loss in fidelity, perhaps, if that conversion has to happen later. It also puts if that has to happen later, it probably puts a larger strain on smaller companies, or sort of one-man small operations, if they also have to do the tooling and do the conversions themselves, compared to if they could just sort of consume both the human readable and machine readable from upstream in their supply chain and then pass that along. That's my thinking on it. But again, I don't either know sort of how much is sort of the cost in time and effort to create the human readable versus machine readable, and how easy are they to translate between. So perhaps that's something to look into. It's also the discussion on what file format should this be in. So for example, the machine readable, should that be in JSON format? Should that be in something else? The human readable, should that be in an Excel format? Should it be in Word, PDF, Clay tablets? We can specify anything, but some of them are probably more useful than others. And for the human readable and machine readable, do we require the same set of underlying SPDX modules to be included in that?
I think one question we can think about maybe and is like what kind of approach might make it easiest for our whole supply chain, right? I think delivering more than one like set of data starts to create, I would think that would create risks of I don't know, maybe one set getting updated or one set getting passed on, the other not. If I'm higher in the supply chain and then someone else is in the middle, then they may have to update both sets and pass them along. I'd almost rather see one set get passed, like a machine readable version, and then let's have an open source project that helps translate that machine version into something human readable, right? And we can all help with that, right?
Yeah, good suggestion. Jimmy, I have to leave at 1:45. Just question in terms of the work of here in this working group. Would it make sense, I mean, all these good questions, to put them down in some spreadsheets and come up with some columns how to rate these questions, what information needs to be considered, what are the pros, what are the cons, and so that participants of this work group can fill in their thoughts into the spreadsheet, gives their, I mean, this can be done live here in the meeting or offline or whatever. But I mean, discussing it now is good, is a good starting point, but I think we should somehow formalize the information gathering somehow a bit and note it down, and that then we can think about, okay, how can this be then decided, or what is the working group's official opinion on that, and what has been considered and so on. Would that make sense, or how do you want to proceed?
I want to proceed in the way the group wants to proceed. I'm here to facilitate. This is the way I'm seeing it. I think what you're saying makes a great deal of sense. I think that's certainly something we could try for. If it's in Excel format, if we do it in PowerPoint or Word format, I'm agnostic to that.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just try to put up something that makes sense. If we start with the terms of reference document that we talked about before, I can easily put together that and upload, and hopefully someone wants to take a stab at creating the comparisons. I could document the questions, and people could fill them in with different arguments on the pro and con side. And either if we do that in Excel or if we do that in PowerPoint or Word, I'm sort of agnostic to that. It's whatever tool seems the best for the job. I'm not a fan of Excel for large amount of text, but it's very structured at least.
Okay, I have to shoot, but thanks for hosting this meeting today. And yeah, I think it would be good to have some kind of document and start documenting the different thoughts from the different participants on these questions, and then to have a joint look together on what everyone gave us feedback and how to proceed with that.
Yeah, and then Jimmy, I think as far as the format goes, like for sharing it, given this OpenChain, at some point we're going to get feedback that we should be using some sort of open, standard or option. I don't know what the other work groups are using, but I'm fine with Word or Excel, but we may get feedback at some point that where we're using some open standard.
As long as I don't have to do it in a TXT file, I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, yeah, thanks, Marcel. Yeah, it was nice.
Yep. See you next time. Thanks. Bye.
I don't know if it makes sense for us to continue, Nathan. We could quickly run through the rest of the topics. Just sort of for you to bring back if there's something sort of want to bring up, or if there's something you would like to raise. But I do agree on the file format. It should probably be an open source file format, or open source compatible one, at least, just from that perspective. The next topic we discussed this morning was sort of the timing of when the SBOM should be delivered. And to fill you in on that discussion, it was the sort of consensus was that it should be delivered together with the software, so no later than the software. But if someone voluntarily wants to put up their SBOM, for display as sort of for marketing purposes or for people to view, or if an open source project wants to do that sort of alongside their own source code, that's of course entirely permissible if people want to do that. So the group sort of leaned to that it would make sense to specify that it should be delivered at latest with the software. And the background is that the participants in that call sort of had the shared experience that it's not always done that way. It sometimes takes weeks or even longer to get the SBOM from the supplier.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, and
I figured that would be sort of one of the least controversial topics.
Yeah. Yeah. So Yeah, no, thanks for, it's just nice to hear what's been happening in the other calls. So if, yeah, no big feedback from me on this one though.
All right, that's perfect. So the only other thing we never got to this point really on discussing if we should have sort of host template contract clauses that people could use to include in their sourcing contracts or in their sales contracts that will conform to this standard. You can find it here or it as in an appendix, just to sort of facilitate for people to implement this in an easy fashion, and sort of playbooks on how that could be done. But we never got to that discussion if that was something people had an appetite for and could think would be potentially useful going forward. So I think we'll return to that one, and then sort of, I think you said so already, but if there's any other business, anything else we should discuss in our last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I just feedback on the template language. It's generally hard to, I think it takes a while to get like a template contract out, but just by having something identifiable with the ISO standard, makes the terms easy to draft. It's easy to say like, hey, deliver us according to, OpenChain version, whatever. And then, or if we eventually had our telco product, in some sort of referenceable, add-on or something like that, or module, people could just refer to that. And then, that would save, drafting of a lot of term. So.
Yeah, really, that's sort of the heart of what this effort is about, right? Standardizing what those terms are, perhaps not the specific writing of them, but what the terms are.
Yeah.
So that we save that part from negotiation every time, and we save the effort of having to comply with multiple different requirements in different contracts.
Yep.
Because we all know that each and every customer is very special and will require something that's tailored to them. Of course, that sort of drives cost and complexity somewhere in the value chain. So it's of course better if we harmonize that.
Yep. And so I think the point I was just making though, or trying to make is that even if we don't have the contract clauses suggested for people, if we have, created a module that OpenChain can refer to, or that's officially blessed by OpenChain, whoever is writing up a contract can just refer to this, and that would get us a long way. So.
Agreed. So good. I guess that's. I noticed my colleague Håkan has left the meeting as well, or left the building. So unless there's anything else, I suggest we close the meeting and you get back 9 minutes of your life.
It sounds good. Well, Jimmy, nice to meet you, and thanks for filling me in on what the other team had talked about. So
great, thanks. And I'll make the slide material available together with minutes of meetings, so that you'll have that information, and send my best to Dave if you speak to him.
Okay, sounds good. I will. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.